Welcome to the NCO Journal podcast, where we explore NCO professional development. This is a podcast series where we discuss published articles with authors and provide a forum for the open exchange of ideas, information, and solutions. I'm your host, Chago Zapata, managing editor of the NCO Journal at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Today, we discuss the article, The Role of the Sending Unit in Talent Management with Sergeant Major Roger Rendon and Lieutenant Colonel Joel Gleason from Human Resources Command. Before we kick things off, gentlemen, could you please tell us a bit about yourselves? Let's start with you, Sergeant Major Rendon.
I'm Sergeant Major Roger Rendon, and currently the G3 Sergeant Major here at Human Resources Command. Prior to this, I was the EPMD, Enlisted Personnel Management Director at Sergeant Major, and during my time there, from 19 to January of 22, I filled that role, and during that time, we did a lot of initiatives, and the most notable one was the Assignment Satisfaction Key Enlisted module, the marketplace for enlisted corps. I'll be headed out to Western Sector MEPCOM to be the Western Sector Command Sergeant Major coming in July.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Joel Gleason. I'm currently the Ordnance Branch Chief for the Enlisted Personnel Management Division of HRC. And the great thing about that job, as an officer throughout your career, you always have great NCOs in your corner, and specifically most positions you have an NCOIC that you're partnered with who really makes you successful. I wouldn't be a lieutenant colonel if it wasn't for NCOs. And as the branch chief for enlisted personnel management of the ordnance branch, I get to pay that back in some ways, where I'm in Sergeant Major Jones's corner, and now Sergeant Major Mendoza has just taken on the reins of the branch sergeant major, and it's just a great opportunity here as the one officer looking over the ordnance branch enlisted assignments, making sure that all those NCOs who have made me successful have the best possible opportunities to be successful. I'm formerly a garrison commander, and I'm a loggy by trade, but this is just in the current seat an opportunity to learn a little bit more about those non-commissioned officers in our great Army.
Let's get started here. What inspired you to write this article?
I'm going to answer that question because I was the primary guy who saw that it needed to be an article, but it's absolutely not my idea. Just sitting in the office, listening to Sergeant Major Jones talking to units in the field, there was a consistent conversation that I overheard him having, which was about, units would call in, they were losing somebody, especially if they were losing somebody they viewed as high talent. There's almost a consternation with that, an attempt to, hey, can we hang on to this guy a little longer? And those conversations would turn from, hey, if you trained this guy, you can train the next guy, to a little better conversation about it. This person's leaving your unit. Don't think of them as a loss. Think of it as an opportunity to send them out into the Army. And I've got a couple of professional articles I've written in my career, so that's where I go to, and I turn to Sergeant Major Jones and say, "Hey, you should write that down. That's a great thing you just said." And he was definitely willing to make an outline and use me as the person who typed it up. And so took a great idea from an NCO that has just some leadership brilliance, and then as we got working on it, we pulled in Sergeant Major Rendon to get it to have a broader voice than just our branch. And it was really inspiring. I would say if anybody out there has a great idea, look for that guy in your unit who loves to write. Or if you're a guy who loves to write, but you're looking for an idea, look for that, non-commissioned officer out in your unit who has something that they keep saying to the formation, but they're just not inclined to write it down. And that's where this started. And it was pretty cool to work with a team to get their brilliance out on paper. So it's broader than just each phone call.
Yeah, the article is if you were to put it on down on paper, it'd be several pages long. And if you were to break all that down into just like, say, one paragraph for, say, a young corporal or newly pinned on sergeant, how would you take this paper, this full paper, and synthesize it to that length for that one individual who may not have that much experience as an NCO or in the Army in general?
I would say, for that young soldier, NCO, whatever you want to call that person, because I truly believe that, this stuff starts down when you came into the military, into the Army. To break it down, to make it smaller, think of talent management as a form of selling yourself to the entire Army. You're not selling yourself just to a unit, but rather the entire Army. You have skills that can be utilized across all formations, not just a formation. Folks always want to stay in one place because they feel comfortable. And that's really the crux of this article. We can't just think, or you can't just think that you're going to be successful in one place. You're going to be successful in the Army because you, the NCO, the soldier, have that aptitude to do great in any formation. And so if units are doing what they're supposed to do, if NCOs are doing what they're doing, then there is no challenge with, I don't want to say losing an NCO, but, releasing that NCO to broaden them elsewhere and then bringing other talent to make them great in your unit.
Now, the article is based on the idea that soldiers shouldn't be lost but should be sent. What are the consequences of thinking of talent management as losses instead of gains?
We don't lose talent, or the unit is not really losing talent. Talent exists in every unit. The talent is there. And if NCOs, if leaders are just training that one person to do a certain thing, and they don't want to lose them because they're their go-to person, then the unit is not doing what they should be doing. Units should be training everybody to be great leaders. And so you have to think of the market and anything like this as not losing talent, but inspiring that talent to be great elsewhere. And so when units are, losing, quote unquote, their folks from their unit and going to other units, really what's happening is great talent is being replaced by great talent. You're not losing it. It's being replaced by other great talent. And so if the Army, if units think of it in those terms, we're never really losing talent. We are just replacing great talent with more great talent.
So what are some of the
Can
tools?
I tie something on to the end of that?
Absolutely.
And as units get the opportunity to send somebody out of their unit, one, they're going to grow somebody behind that person. So we increase the talent. And when you see somebody who's got a lot of experience in your unit and they're departing, sure, there's a little fear of loss with regard to that departure, but you also have that person who's so talented at what you do going to learn something else. So it diversifies their talent really by growing their replacement and sending them somewhere else. We double the talent in the Army, whereas the consequence of viewing that as a loss and trying to hang on to that individual is that we cut the Army's talent in half. We have to send people out to have a talented Army.
This kind of leads to my next question here. What are some of the tools you would recommend using when counseling an NCO looking forward to an upcoming marketplace?
We always, at least in my time there at EPMD, and even now, and even before, we always use the DAPAM 600-25. Those branches utilize that product to map out an NCO's career. And so as a NCO, as a leader, it doesn't matter if the leader is an NCO or a commissioned officer or what have you. If you are not utilizing that NCO's career development map and DAPAM 600-2025, you're not counseling them to their full potential. That's one thing. The other thing is, and the professional development NCOs do a really good job of this. The NCOs need to communicate with the HRC, Human Resources Command, because a lot of times folks think, hey man, I call HRC and they're going to put me on assignment. No, that's not how this works. Every NCO now has a YMAV, year month available to move, and so that's how we are looking at folks to move the YMAV. We're not just going to put you on assignment simply because we feel like it now. But those are two things. And the other thing is, and I can't stress this enough, when the NCO is inside a market, those senior NCOs of that unit know that their NCOs are in the market. They should do a little bit of market mentorship. Let's say, for example, Sergeant Rendon is in a market, and we have Sergeant Gleason, Master Sergeant Gleason, Sergeant Major Gleason, whatever, Colonel Gleason, who is right there with them, and looking at those assignments that Sergeant Rendon can preference. They need to have a frank conversation and say, hey, look, based on what we see here in your career development map and DAPAM 625 and your previous assignments, I think you should preference certain units in this fashion. The professional development NCOs do a really good job of giving that information to the NCO inside the market, broadening operational things like that and generating as well. And so using DAPAM 625, calling PD NCOs, and then those senior NCOs or senior leaders inside the formation to do market mentorship are some of those key things that I say help out with the NCOs in the market.
On a recent series of articles by Sergeant Major Collins from the Sergeants Major Academy discussed Project Athena. How would you tie Project Athena and the personal self-assessment battery of tests and how that helps NCOs going through the marketplace?
Yeah, and Project Athena, correct me if I'm wrong, but it speaks to doing these evaluations and figuring out what your best fit is going to be, if I'm not mistaken. And for the purpose of the market right now, it's not tied in. But I believe that when IPSA comes online, that will be utilized a lot more.
I'm familiar with it. I could say something that kind of answers that question. So I think that gets into some of the concepts of what is the wise thing to do. We want mentorship, but we want to make sure that our mentorship is for the individual we're mentoring. It's not something where we go and tell them to do exactly what our path was. That's sometimes the right answer, but often doesn't make sense. So really, the more they know themselves, the more we can say, hey, what is the wise thing to do based on your talents, your attributes, your future goals, your family needs? Where should you go? And where is the next thing? And that's maybe a way to have a conversation that breaks them out of the temptation to simply rank the market by location, but rather by what you need to do. A technique I've used in the past where I have a number of assignments to rank is I will block the ones that are, this is the job I need the most, and here's the next job that would help me out. And then I take those brackets to Mrs. Gleason, and she ranks them by location. So, hey, here's the 5 jobs that would be the right first choice for me. And by the way, she's put this particular location first. And that know yourself conversation is about that, right? Because it's not just knowing your NCO, but also making sure that she's communicated with her husband or he's communicated with his wife, or they're considering those other things. And um, if you're somebody who's more interested um, in getting your hands dirty in a tank engine than in sitting there and kind of getting studious, then maybe Army Futures Command isn't as interesting as one of the life cycle management commands. I'm just thinking within the ordnance branch. So that's really important in market mentorship, is that you consider what the NCO knows of themselves.
When advocating to Human Resources Command for a great soldier, what are some steps you would take to ensure a successful outcome?
So, when you're advocating for an NCO, you're really looking at that NCO to perhaps go into an assignment that will best fit that NCO. It's not so much him or her moving just to move. For example, there's times when leaders will mention to the branch A, this NCO it might be a good candidate to go to, let's say, Futures Command, or be a drill sergeant, or be a recruiter, or these other nominative positions that are out there. And it goes back to market mentorship. Like I said before, those senior leaders have to take that active role in going into and seeing the market themselves to make sure that they're doing that advocation, being that advocate for that NCO. Sometimes there is a need to keep an NCO, stabilize that NCO in that unit. For example, you have an NCO that's going to be a squad leader, or a platoon sergeant, or a section chief, or what have you, or an S1 NCO, I see, for a battalion or brigade. Those NCOs, those senior leaders, need to be able to advocate for that NCO correctly, and that goes into making sure that they can stabilize said NCO. You have about 45 days prior to any market to make sure that NCO is stabilized. Now, things do happen, and so we for the most part, HRC is going to work with the unit, but and I can't overstate this. Once an NCO is in the market, it's not about the unit that is going to end up having this NCO depart from. It's about the other unit gaining that NCO. Because at the end of the day, that NCO or that gaining unit is going to be, looking for that NCO to come on in. So we have to make sure that we understand that when we advocate, we have to be well in advance of any marketplace. And so, 45 days out, we want to make sure that if we're going to stabilize, want to, need to, then those actions are taken. But advocating for those NCOs, if you want to stabilize them for future leadership roles inside that unit, is always looked at by HRC, and HRC will work with that unit. But again, once the NCO is inside the market, it's about that unit that's going to gain that NCO.
Can I just tie on to that, Sergeant Major? That the other part of it is understanding that HRC has shifted, as you said earlier, from that year month available to move, or YMAV, to, well, they've shifted from looking at time on station as the primary moving mechanism to now we have a year month available to move. And the key word is available. It doesn't mean that NCO has to move. And so it's really something where, if you do the math back, 45 days before that NCO is entered into the marketplace really means, if it's a 36-month to YMAV, you're looking at somewhere between 24 and 26 months on station when that NCO is going to be moving into a marketplace so that they can get orders in time to move. So when you get somebody on station, consider if you want to stabilize them. Consider if it's the right thing to do to um, pull their high school stabilization packet through a little faster to get it in to make sure that they're moving in the right direction, or stabilize them for a position, because they don't have to stay in your unit to stay on station. And that's what adjusting that YMAV is about. If there's talent management to be done right at, say, for example, a big place like Fort Hood or Fort Riley, or you can keep those NCOs in place, then you should do it.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and you bring up a great point, because there are opportunities, like you said, across those larger installations, and even in the smaller installations where there's maybe 4 or 5 units, there's opportunities there to grow. An NCO does not have to stay in one organization their entire career or their entire time on that station to be successful and to grow. And to gain that experience. That's what that market mentorship, and that's what that advocating for that NCO talks about: counseling them, mentoring them, advocating for them to move in and around that installation. You can definitely be a squad leader, platoon sergeant, and perhaps a first sergeant in these large installations. But obviously, there are other broadening and generating opportunities that NCOs should take advantage of in order to be that well-rounded NCO.
Let me play devil's advocate here, gents. What about an NCO who maybe doesn't have somebody who can advocate for him? Maybe the first, like I said, being a devil's advocate, maybe the first sergeant or his sergeant major is doing things elsewhere, or whatever the case may be. What can an NCO do to advocate for themselves, or what can NCOs do to advocate for themselves if they don't have somebody to advocate for them?
We always talk about always find a mentor, always have a mentor, always have mentors. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an NCO mentor. You'd be surprised because there's a lot of mentorship going on of NCOs, and you see a lot of officers doing that, as well as senior and enlisted folks. You see a lot of that mentorship, and so if it's not happening inside your formation for some strange reason, then reach out to other senior NCOs, senior leaders to help you out, advocate for you. And like I said before, calling HRC and seeking out that guidance is always welcome, because you'll find that inside the footprint are those PDNCOs that are going to do those things for you. They're going to help you out, and they're going to make sure that you're taken care of, obviously. But again, finding that mentor is always going to be helpful. If your first sergeant, your sergeant major is for some odd reason not there to assist you as much as possible, have that frank conversation with your platoon sergeant maybe, but always look to senior NCOs or NCOs that are senior ranking than you. Actually, if you're an E6 or E7, and you find that E6 or E7 buddy that's going to talk to you about your assignment, just need to find someone that's a little with a little bit more senior time behind them.
When a soldier receives orders, what are some of the first things leaders should do? Or is that kind of digging into, because I know you were saying that you should probably start looking after 24 months on station. Do you go into the marketplace after that, or do you go into the marketplace at a certain, I don't know, maybe you could expand on that for me.
A NCO normally incurs, once they're in a unit, about 36 months, a 36-month YMAV. They're there for 36 months. 12 months prior to their YMAV, they're going to be looked at to be put in a market. Okay, so 12 months out, that's when NCOs are going to enter a marketplace. So they'll be in the market. It's a 6-week market where they can go in and they can look and see all the assignments that are going to be open to them once they hit their 36-month time there on station. Now, once they come out of the market, they've already done their preferencing and everything. It takes around 4 to 6 weeks for them to be placed on an assignment. So now you're looking at anywhere from 10 months to be placed on assignment instructions, 6 to 10 months to be placed on assignment instructions. And now, once you get placed on assignment instructions, then the installation will cut orders for you. HRC does not have anything to do with the orders cutting, orders processing, timeline. All HRC does is the assignments instruction, placing the person on an assignment. The installation does the orders processing.
I'm really glad that I asked that question, that you broke it down to that simple form. I think that it's important. Maybe, once NCOs get to become more senior, maybe you take for granted the fact that you acquired this knowledge about how things work. Whereas those who are younger or maybe haven't been in the Army that long, maybe they just don't know and don't know to ask. So that information you just provided, I think it's very relevant to the audience, because there might be some people out there who don't know this process. I know for sure an NCO, my NCO, Staff Sergeant Woods, who was who was the previous NCO replaced by Staff Sergeant Cox, and it would have been interesting for us to be able to discuss this before he PCS to his duty station that he's at now. So I appreciate that, and you breaking it down, I think, is important.
And something we didn't talk about in the article, currently there's 4 marketplaces a year. So as we go, each marketplace has a 5-month block of, when you could get your report date to occur. But the other thing that, it's a little nuanced. It's part of why we didn't put it in writing, is that it's changed. There hasn't always been 4 markets a year. Maybe it'll change in the future. We don't know. And that's not in any way me speaking for HRC. But also, depending on the size of your MOS may not necessarily be in every single market. If we have an MOS within the ordnance branch that has a really small population, an 89 Delta 50, for example, it doesn't necessarily make sense to run a market 4 times a year, when twice a year makes more sense, when there's only going to be 6 individuals in the market, and it gives them a little more choice to consolidate them. We don't always do that, but it's worth understanding that there's a rhythm to these markets, and you want to talk directly to your branch and your assignment managers, your talent management NCOs at HRC to understand what your particulars are about your marketplace.
Okay, sir, you hit on something that a lot of times folks miss, and I'm really glad that you brought that up, which is not every MOS has a market every single time. And that's really key, because from time to time, and I look at social media, and I also hear a lot of folks say, hey, I know the market's open, but I didn't have anything. What's the deal? So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because you're right. Not every MOS, not every skill grade, pay grade has a market every single time that's open. So I appreciate you saying that. And Mr. Zapata, for the benefit of everybody that's going to listen to this podcast, one thing is needed to be said. HRC is always there to make sure that folks understand the process, the market, the manning process, the assignment process, and are willing and able to go out there and provide that information, because in the environment that we were in for a couple of years, we kind of lost that. Not being able to visit posts and do those things. And so really happy to do it in the podcast and, to publish this thing. But HRC is there to assist and help anybody that wants to get this valuable message and this valuable knowledge out.
Yeah, no news is good news is no longer true, right? It's safe to talk to your branch. It's okay to make a phone call. Having these YMAVs, having these marketplaces, having an ability to stabilize or extend your YMAV if your unit's going to request that, are all things that make it so that the old adage of, if you don't talk to branch, or it's probably not an adage, the old suspicion that if you don't talk to branch, maybe they'll leave you alone, no longer true. Talk to us sooner rather than later.
You said in your article that once NCOs are in the Ask 'em marketplace, that they now belong to someone else. What does this look like in a unit, and what does it mean for the NCO?
When the NCO, and this is after, folks have requested, stabilizations or things have been looked at from every CMF, every management field, every MOS, every pay grade, how the markets are set. Once an NCO enters the market, those units that have requirements that need to be filled, the NCO is going to preference, from one to end, however many, preferences that NCO has. An NCO can have anywhere, they can have a whole number of units that they can preference from. Those units have that requirement that needs to get filled. And so now it's no longer that unit that NCO is at, that is going to have that requirement for that NCO. Those other units are looking to get that NCO into their formation. We mentioned earlier, it's not about losing the NCO. It's about creating more opportunities for great NCOs to move to another unit so that they can see that greatness in that NCO. And the unit that NCO is leaving from is going to gain another great NCO. So when a unit is quote unquote losing an NCO, it's not really them losing it. They're gonna gain another NCO during the cycle, during the manning cycle. But those losing units, those gaining units, they're going to be looking for that NCO to get there. And so when an NCO is preferencing all these units, that's really where that mentorship, that's really where, making sure that they understand, well, where they want to go to, how they want to use their talents, and what places they want to go into. That's where that market mentorship goes into play. Those gaining units are going to require, those NCOs to go into those units. We can't just try to pull an NCO out of a cycle simply because during a manning cycle it's a little too late. And so now those senior NCOs have to make sure that when they're talking to those NCOs, they say, hey, look, these are units here that you're going to be able to excel here. You've already learned in our unit. Now you're going to be taking these talents elsewhere. That's really what we mean by that.
You mentioned that command teams that demonstrate their understanding of how soldiers departing their unit fit into the Army talent management do not go unnoticed. Can you share examples of when you've noticed this in various units?
Hey, I have a good example of that from my personal career. I was a G4 in a small unit in Europe, and we had a couple of NCOs in the G4 shop who were definitely talent we needed within the section. But in addition, some of our downtrace units, needed the same skills. And um, my G4 NCOIC came over and pitched an idea to me that was just spot on for talent management. We had um, a promotable sergeant first class. There was a opportunity to go take a first sergeant position, actually standing up a unit. So that added to the piece, and we wanted to find the right individual for it. And so we found that first sergeant job for him, despite the fact that we could have definitely held on to him. And as a G4, we didn't limp, but we definitely needed to train up some additional people to fill the gap that was left. But by my NCOIC bringing that to me, when I pointed it out to the chief of staff, um, that just became the kind of thing that spoke positively to our reputation, right? We as the G4 were still going to accomplish our mission, but we were going to make sure that the units within our footprint were also successful. And some of that is about moving your people around, right? That's maybe a higher level example, moving to first sergeant, that happens, but I would say the same is true when you're able to demonstrate to your command that you can take a staff sergeant who's currently an excellent squad leader, send them to that, broadening assignment, generating assignment. Perhaps they go to, be a recruiter, which is great for their career. And you take a sergeant promotable and groom them to be that squad leader. Not only have you demonstrated that you understand the bigger Army mission and you're willing to let people go, but you've also demonstrated that the talent that's in your formation is there because you're training them.
I think it speaks volumes when not only are senior NCOs involved in the talent management process of viewing these things as opportunities, but it speaks volumes to our fellow officers that are with us to acknowledge and also say, you know what, first sergeant, master sergeant, whatever, you are absolutely right. How can I assist? How can I help make this NCO successful so that other units are successful? And how can we go ahead and implement something in our current unit to make sure that we stay successful? So it's a real feather in the hat to hear and know that officers and NCOs working together to make sure that the NCO Corps stays strong through proper talent management.
Do you gentlemen have any other ideas that could help or change or tweak the current Army talent management program?
So I think there's a next article that's already brewing as far as what we're currently talking about, right? Right now, we're talking about the sending unit, letting somebody go, or maybe not even letting them go, but being deliberate about where they go so that we employ talent the right way. And one of those things that has come up a couple of times is, what if somebody's in a position where it frequently happens. A great example is, if they're the general's driver. And we'll just go with that. There's probably a category of those kind of positions where you got picked and you have somebody senior who can speak on your behalf. And there's another opportunity that can follow that. And we'll sometimes get phone calls at HRC that ask us to take somebody who's currently in that position and move them to another unique opportunity. And those are always awesome, and we do what we can to support those. But the conversation that needs to be had is, where is the talent piece of that, right? If somebody who is a mechanic is currently a driver, that's obviously not a mechanic position unless their own vehicle breaks down. Um, and then we're going to move them to another organization that is also not doing maintenance. We have to bear in mind that that individual enlisted in the Army in order to be a mechanic, and in order to be a talented supervisor of other mechanics, they need more opportunities to be in the motor pool. And so we're looking at having these conversations where, maybe it's something that you owe that person a favor, but hey, technology is good enough that you can schedule that after the next assignment and say, hey, look, uh, Sergeant, I'm going to take care of you, but I'm going to take care of your career as well. So I'm going to send you to go do a maintenance supervision job. And then in 2 years, I'm going to get back in touch with you because I know you wanted this opportunity and I'm going to pull you into that. So it's really looking at aligning talent, employing talent as it goes, but it's acquire, develop, employ, and retain talent within the Army People Strategy. Sergeant Major Rendon is going to be able to tell us a lot about acquiring talent. He's going to MEPCOM. Develop is really a trade-off thing, but as the operational force, those assignments where we employ talent is part of how we develop talent. So we just want to consider that as we assign people around the Army. How are we employing them in a manner that further develops them?
Yeah, yes, sir. And, in acquiring talent, like I said, initially, you need to start, as an NC, as a soldier, start looking at, the long term. You can start looking at things to do, from the time you come into the Army, 5, 10, 15 years down the road. There's nothing saying that you can't do that. But it does require, some mentorship. It does require you, the soldier, the NCO, to understand your career development path, and then be able to, have those frank conversations, not only with your leaders there, but also with HRC. Like Colonel Gleason said, long gone are the days of, if HRC doesn't hear from me, they're not going to pay attention to me. No, you have to communicate often, not just to HRC, but across your unit. But being able to predict where you're going to go 2, 3 assignments down the road is definitely something in terms of talent management that we would like to and to do and pursue here soon. Over.
Yeah, and to hit the last of the concepts, retain talent, right? There's no better way to retain talent than making sure that our great soldiers have the opportunities required to get promoted. It makes it a lot easier to stay in if you keep moving up.
You talked a little about, at the very beginning of our conversation, you talked a little bit about choosing the NCO Journal, to publish with the NCO Journal. I know there was a process. Can you talk about a little about why you chose to publish with us, and what do you think of the process, and would you encourage others to do the same, and why?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So I mentioned at the beginning, I have a couple of professional publications out there, and my particular thing, I think it's 10 articles that I've got out there, and of those 10, 6 of them I co-authored. And it really is, there's 3 ways to co-author. To put it simply, the way that everybody assumes people co-author is, you both maybe open up a Google Doc that you share, and somebody goes in there and writes, and somebody else goes in there and writes, and that is the absolute hardest way to co-author. If you have a best friend, a brother, a twin, then I'd recommend that. An office mate might turn into the right person for that. But the other 2 ways to co-author are much simpler. One way is the idea generator and the writer, and that's what this article was from. Um, our, Sergeant Major Rendon, Sergeant Major Jones um, gave me the ideas. I like to write, so I was willing to type it up for them. I handed it back to them. They came back, hey, let's change this. Let's be more positive here. Let's make sure we include this concept, until we had something we felt was worth submitting. The third way, and I'll move on to the answer to your question, the third way is kind of the same way you build an op order. There's one person who leads it. They assign sections to different people. That's also challenging. But once we had that idea together, we sent it into the NCO Journal. We chose that because this is a topic for NCOs, because we wanted the breadth of your audience. We wanted to make sure that we got the word out to people. And what I didn't know when I submitted it to the NCO Journal is how much editorial excellence I would get. I think I submitted a pretty decent article. When these gentlemen said it was okay to push send, I was pretty happy with it. And if you'd have published that document, I'd still be, proud of it. And I think Sergeant Major Rendon and Sergeant Major Jones would be too, of what I typed up of their ideas. But the um, the editorial team at the NCO Journal made it into a great article. And I'd say if you've got NCOs out there listening, and you're saying, hey, I read this article and it looked hard to do. That's terrific. Send whatever you've done to the team and they'll make your article look hard to do as well. Because the editorial work that the NCO Journal put onto this article made it better, made it very polished, and really, I'll say thank you. It's better than it would have been, and it's a good team, and I think nobody should feel intimidated about sending something in if they're looking at their own work. You got to know the stuff that you're seeing out on the net has some other people who've put their hands on it to make it as good as it is.
A lot of times NCOs are I don't want to say put off by professional writing in general. But I believe that in the end, if you give it to other folks to look at, anything, it doesn't matter if it's an award, an evaluation, an article, an essay, whatever. If you give it to other folks to look at and you're okay with that criticism, that constructive criticism, it's not as intimidating as some folks may feel it is. And I'll tell you right now, me not being an excellent writer and seeing what Colonel Gleason and Sergeant Major Jones provided me, I just gave a few tidbits of information, something that I thought would benefit, and then just to see the end product. Really, I just want to say thank you to both of you and to the NCO Journal, for making this thing what it truly should be, and that is something for the NCO Corps and honestly for leaders across the Army to read and be able to capitalize on. Without the efforts of Colonel Gleason, Sergeant Major Jones, and the help and assistance from NCO Corps, this would not have been possible. And honestly, those conversations that you have back and forth in the cubicle over here at HRC proved to be the genesis of this thing. So everybody, thank you.
Thank you for being with us, for taking the time to have this conversation with us and to expand on your excellent article. It was a pleasure working with you, and I appreciate you. The back and forth, I think, was very helpful, and that's why one of the reasons why we changed our publishing process here, because we wanted to have a little more of the back and forth and polish that article even more than we would have had we had a shorter publishing time. So thanks again. And thank you to our audience. Remember to put your knowledge to the page, submit articles, and get published with the NCO Journal. Don't forget to check out our webpage and follow us on social media. We'll catch you next time on the NCO Journal podcast.